Welcome to Amazing Stories of Amazing Grace. I'm your host, Chester Stanley, and we're delighted to have in the studio Pastor David Edgar. David has a fascinating story in terms of his journey to an understanding of grace and God's grace in his life. David, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Good to have you with us, and as you've shared with me, you do have indeed a thrilling and inspiring story of God's leading in your life. It wasn't always that way. Why don't we go right back, and why don't you share with us your background? Where were you brought up? Where did you go to school?
I was raised in Sydney, in Australia, and went to a primary school in one of the suburbs, and then caught the train to a high school in another suburb. It was a denominational, Christian denominational school, and went right through that school. Good experience? As I reflect, I'd say yes. Now, I probably have changed my mind over recent weeks, even. There were a lot of gracious people. I just couldn't see them at the time. And it's only as we reflect on our past, we think that, well, that guy was trying to help me. But at the time, I was, I guess, a little bit rebellious and didn't really take the counsel that was offered. Thought I knew best. Wanted to do it my own way. And come unstuck in many times. But in reflection, it was a good schooling. Really was.
Be a bit of discipline.
A lot of discipline in the system that I was raised in. It was very common. One would say that it was probably, and may even still be, the best way to learn. Whether it's the easiest, I'm not sure. Whether it's the happiest, I'm not sure. But you had to learn, or can I say suffer the consequences?
Yes, for sure. Okay, so...
But I had some lovely teachers too.
Yes, for sure.
Them. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, David, so you're a young man. What happened next?
I made some unfortunate choices when I was in my early teens and got into a little bit of trouble, and that just went down from worse to worse. An engineer who was an American actually saw obviously where I was headed. I didn't know, but he knew someone in the military and got me in the military, and I didn't know whether that was good or bad, but within the 10 weeks of rookies, they sorted me out and I was on my way. Matter of fact, in the first 3 weeks, I had rebelled again and they threatened to send me home. And I didn't want to go home because the environment that I was in, I thought was a great environment. And so I just decided to turn around and make something of my life. And so my journey started then, I guess, away from trouble and on to success in a way.
Yes, keep going.
They gave me a trade which ended up to be 3 trades, which I've used through the years and never been out of work. I've always had great affection for the fact that someone took hold of me when I was really down, and they helped me on my journey in those early years.
Very good. So what sort of commitment did you have? Did you have any Christian commitment at this stage, or? Not really.
Unfortunately, the school that I went to, I couldn't get away from quick enough because it was discipline. It was, you had to do this or there are the consequences, and I wanted to be free. And I thought that doing it my own way was the best way to freedom, which obviously wasn't. But in the military, I knuckled down and did well. I left my religion behind and went into Eastern religions. And I was in that for 17 years, and I practiced that.
Okay, well, you need to tell us something about that. When you say you're in what do you mean by that, you're in Eastern religions?
Well, I've always been a reader. Yes. And I came across some books that one of my buddies in my squadron had, and he shared them with me, and over the next 3 or 4 years I bought every book that I could on the subject, joined an organisation in America and became a student, a neophyte, and then moved through the ranks. And
are we talking about Buddhism here, or no? This is post-Buddhism.
Buddhism and the occult go together very well. And of course, it was presented as a natural science. And because I've always been sort of that way, especially with an engineering background and discipline, science was something that was attractive to me. And the natural science was, to me, just natural. And so I progressed in that fairly well. Had a couple of scares, which I don't understand. Well, I didn't understand then, but do now. And then followed that through in my marriage. But my wife wasn't really on board with that.
Okay, when you say you had a couple of scares, I mean, that doesn't mean a lot to me. What do you mean by that?
I was doing an experiment one night. Can I describe the setting to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. The setting was, the room was black. I had 2 candles in front of a mirror, and I had a robe on with a hood. And the idea of the hood was to keep away what we were told were elemental spirits, so that they wouldn't impinge on your thoughts. And the idea was that you were to look into your own eyes, and eventually you would break through into another world. Well, I got this all set up, and I was really excited about it because it was something new. And I looked into my eyes, and I saw the most horrible thing. And it wasn't me, and it just scared me. And so I quickly jumped up and turned the light on, and I never did that experiment again. And that was probably the scariest one. Another experience I had was what people understand now as out-of-body experiences. I had them fairly regularly. And I understand what they are now. They are simply dreams that the devil puts in your mind. I'm convinced of that over the years. And so by the time I was 34, I was still searching for peace, but I was searching in the wrong area, but I didn't know it at that time. And so then something happened in my family, and all the training and all the learning could not supply the answer. And so I looked out the window, and by the way, I had always believed in God, always believed in the 10 Commandments, never doubted that one for one moment. I looked out the window and looked up to the sky, and all I said was, God, what have I got to believe? And it was as simple as that. And it just came back in my head like a telephone call. Believe the Bible, David. I had never seen one, never held one.
Amazing.
Yeah. And by this time I'd left the military, and I was working for a couple of Christian men, and I asked them, I knew that they would know where to get a Bible, and so I asked them.
And they supplied you with a Bible?
No, well, they told me where to go and get one.
Yes. Okay, David, thanks very much. We'll just pause there. I'm sure you're enjoying this enthralling story, and we'll be right back after the break. Welcome back to Amazing Stories of Amazing Grace, and we're with Pastor David Edgar. David, it's an interesting journey so far, and you seem to mention quite a few times the issue of discipline in your various experiences, commencing from your schooling and going right through. Would you like to elaborate on that a bit?
I think in my school, with the way that we had to learn in those days was by rote. And not much understanding went in, and so I assumed that that's how everyone learned. When I joined the military, I applied that same discipline to the military, both in the trade training and in the drill, for instance. So that was further confirming the fact that to get by in this world, you had to be disciplined, and if you didn't follow the rules, then you're not going to make it. And so when I was discharged from the military, I sat some further trade tests and became qualified as a general fitter and a motor mechanic, and I specialised in jet engines in the military. And so with those 3 areas of engineering, basically scientific and mathematic, you can see that discipline was, and the point that I had to do it right was fairly well entrenched into me. And then in my Eastern religion, in my occult studies, the same thing again. You learnt things by rote and you applied those things quite strictly. And so, so this discipline thing was something that was ingrained into me. And from my life, if you didn't do that, you wouldn't succeed in anything. When I became a Christian, I applied that same discipline to both the Bible. I read the Bible 5 times in 12 months and memorised I don't know how many texts, because that's what I did before. Same thing with the Spirit of Prophecy. Read it as much as I could, memorised as much as I could, because this is how I thought good Christians worked. And so with that discipline and with that rigour, I have continued in that vein ever since. But being a church pastor, you get questions from parishioners saying, "Pastor, what do I have to do to enjoy my Christian experience?" And for many years, I would simply quote a text. But I would quote that text and not really have the understanding. I had the fervour and I had the excitement and I had the passion because I believed deeply in it. But to really help that parishioner over the line, I knew in my heart of hearts that I lacked something. And so the journey that I had begun in Buddhism was a journey that was not yet complete, because I still did not have that peace in my heart that I so yearned, that others thought a pastor should have. Whether that's right or whether that's wrong, maybe we expect too much of our pastors because they are human. But for my particular journey, you can see the rigour that I had learnt was being applied to my Christianity, even up till recent years.
So this is an ongoing process that your understanding currently is continuing to grow.
Yeah,
in terms of...
I don't think that I will ever put aside the rigour. I think I will always do that, because I still feel that you have to learn somehow. Whether you learn by watching something or memorising, you still have to learn. But something was lacking in my faith. And so I was still searching for that. I think I found it now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, do you want to share with us, how did you find this? What was the process?
It's by reading a lot, but you can read and not understand, and the light just doesn't go on. I interviewed a visiting speaker about 12 months ago for a story that I was writing, and he had just written a book, and I'd read a little bit about his life, his bio, etc., but had not yet read the book and didn't know a thing about it. I interviewed him it was only supposed to be a short one, but I ended up staying with him for almost 45 minutes, and I didn't want to leave. The man had something behind his eyes that I knew that I wanted. And at the end of the interview, he sold me on what he had, gave me a copy of his book, and it's 303 pages, the book. 12 months ago I started reading it, and I'm only up to page 90.
Okay.
I get up every morning, well, I shouldn't say every morning, most mornings that I can, study a bit, and I find that I've got to read something 3 or 4 times because it's just so deep. And sometimes I will only read one paragraph and it'll just blow me away. And I just think about it. And the experience has been truly, truly wonderful.
So you feel, David, there has been a real growth in your understanding of what it means to be a genuine Christian?
I think there's a hole being filled in my heart.
Yes. Yes.
That it's the process of sanctification. It's something that every Christian goes through, and we all have different paths to take in our journey, and the Lord knows which path to take us on. And I think that if we ask Him, He'll take us on that path. And I don't know where my journey is going to end, but it's exciting, and I love it.
So what essentially are these new understandings that you have gained?
Coming from having to earn salvation.
Yes. Okay.
The Bible is essentially a book about salvation.
Yes.
There are a lot of stories in it, and I'm just reading the Old Testament through again, and some of those stories I've said to the Lord, Lord, why in the world have you got that horrible story in there? I remember one of my parishioners a few years ago, a young mum, come up to me and she said, David, she said, I'm not going to read the Old Testament anymore. I said, why? She said, because there's so many horrible stories in it. And so now, this is 10 years ago, and I'm rereading those stories again, and you think, Lord, why is that horrible story in there? But there are good reasons for it, and we know that. But as I continue on, I just see the wonderful grace of God in those stories. And it's really magnified, of course, in the New Testament. And so my journey is into grace at the moment. And that doesn't mean that I throw out the fact that I have to be obedient.
Sure.
But the motive is totally different.
Yes. Thanks for that, David. We'll be right back after a break to conclude David's wonderful journey. Welcome back to Amazing Stories of Amazing Grace, and we're with Pastor David Edgar. It's been a dramatic journey, David, and it's been interesting for you to share it with us. Just sort of going back in summary, right back, where you've been, and then where are you today?
I think probably the thing that really started me on my journey from a Christian point of view was when my friend got the Bible for me, and I read the last book first, because in a good story, if you read the last chapter, you know whether it's worth reading. Because of my studies in Oriental and the occult, the symbolism in the book of Revelation was something that totally enthralled me. I'd finished that chapter, and I can still remember as plain as day thinking, the world that I'd always hoped existed is here in the Bible.
Interesting.
And I grabbed that. And so, for me, that really was the start of my Christian journey. I had no idea that I was being converted. But for 6 months, there was a lump in my chest that was totally amazing. I thought I was having a heart attack, in actual fact. That's really what I thought it was for 6 months. And lo and behold, I had no Christian to guide me. I had no idea what was happening. So
you just get given this Bible and start reading
so
Revelation.
I sort of read myself into Christianity. My friends helped. They invited me to church. I went to church the first time, and I vowed and declared I'd never darken the doorstep again. It was so boring. And I don't mean that in a wrong way, but from the world that I came from, it was boring. But after my conversion, of course, it was a totally different attitude. And so with the reading, I never totally understood the Bible, and so I started reading other books. And if we were to move right up to where I am at the moment with my current reading, I'm currently reading a book on grace, plus also a book on Chinese philosophy. And it's amazing how the two can complement each other. One stretches the mind with a culture that is totally foreign to me, but it reminds me of my journey. The Bible was, in one way, was totally foreign, but it was something that I understood from the first.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. And your understanding today is that there's still some ways to go?
Oh, absolutely. The thing that strives me, makes me strive, is the fact that I just get so excited about how the Lord is opening up to my mind different areas of study that I have known intellectually, academically, but not really had any heart understanding of them. And now, and this is why I don't read too much, because I don't want to miss anything. And the things that I read, it's almost like I'm scared to go too fast now, whereas before I would read a book very quickly. I'm scared to go too fast because I don't want to miss anything now, because the journey is just so exciting at the moment. And the thing is that I know that at the end of the day, Peter says, I think 1 Peter 1:9, the goal of our faith is salvation. And that's really what the Bible is. It's a book about salvation at the end of the day. Sometimes I think that we focus so much on ourselves that we lose this big picture. The fact that God is there to save us, and he's given us this wonderful book to show us how to get there.
David, you're an Adventist pastor. Just how come?
I was washing up one night, and I was just wondering where I was going. And I looked at, we had a telephone next to the wall, and the phone rang, but it didn't ring, it rang in my head. And I looked at the phone, and the voice said, "Be a pastor, David," and I had no idea. I had no idea of Avondale College. All I said was, "Okay, but you've got to help." Silly to say that to who I know, God. And the next day, out of the blue, a Jacaranda book from Avondale College came. How it got there, where it came from, to this day, 27 years later, I have no idea. But that's where I found out that you had to go. There's a little story with that, because I rang them up. And the lady who answered the phone ended up one of my dear friends. And I said, "Is that where you go to become a pastor?" And she said, "Yes." And then she said, "Do you have any money?" I said, "No." And she said, "Well, you can't come here then." And that was an amazing thing, because that woman ended up one of my best friends. And all I can say is that, you know, we may well be Christians, but that doesn't mean we're not susceptible to negative influences from other sources from time to time. Like I said, that lady ended up a dear friend of mine. And so we ended up making Weet-Bix and struggling for 4 years, as you well know about. And in that 4 years, it was just a series of miracles for the whole 4 years. I hadn't been to school for so long, and yet time after time the Lord had blessed.
And so, David, in terms of your ministry, when we reflect back, I mean, you know, the schooling experience, the juvenile delinquency, you know, the rebellion in the Air Force, as well as the discipline, the occult, Buddhism. It's a pretty dramatic story. Your ministry, your work as a pastor, do you find it inspiring, satisfying?
Oh, there is no better work. And even now that I'm not actually in the field anymore, I miss the dynamics, and I'm sure you do too. There is a dynamic as a church pastor, because you're, at the end of the day, there is no more important work than saving souls. There is no more important work. It doesn't matter what the world offers. To offer someone eternal life and have some small part in helping them on their journey is such a privilege and a blessing. It really is.
Does your family, are they supportive of your journey?
Well, they are now. They're of a different faith, and they sort of cut me off for a little while and didn't understand.
And you obviously met a sweet lady.
I did.
Before you were a Christian? Or?
Yeah, we were married beforehand. We had a family beforehand. And
she was happy to join you in your search?
Well, she is now.
Yes, but she wasn't
at the well, it was my journey initially, and our spouses come along with us because they love us.
Yes.
And fortunately, I have seen the Lord work so much in my wife's life, just miracle after miracle, and she loves him greatly.
That's
I don't mind her having another man, if I can say that in.
Yes, right. Very, very good. That's excellent. Any final word? About 10 seconds?
I think the grace of Jesus Christ is the thing that he wants us to understand, because when we understand that grace, we can extend that to others.
Thanks very much, David. It's been a privilege to have you with us here in Amazing Stories of Amazing Grace. May the Lord continue to bless, and we look forward to seeing you next time.